Welcome to the August edition of San Francisco's, Small Firm Forum, Oakland. And, we're all still learning the ropes here, but we're getting better and getting more used to the system. Does anyone have an announcement they would like to make? Everybody's muted. If you want to talk, unmute yourself or wave your hand and let me know that you have an announcement. Donald.
Just a couple of housekeeping things. I apologize, we have another Zoom going on in the background. I hope you can hear okay. So two things. One, those of you who are AIA members and you want to be sure to get your AIA continuing education credits, we need a way to know that you're here and that you're an AIA member. So that's why, like my name, if you notice how it's written, we can go through the images of everyone during the meeting and pick out the people that are AIA members and then pass that on to the chapter staff, and then they can handle the paperwork. However, if it's hard to change that now because you're already here, maybe you can send me a chat at the bottom of the screen and just announce that you're an AIA member. Richard, I saw you. I know you are an AIA member. The second thing is that we have an email list that we use for our announcements. The announcement goes out the Sunday before the meeting and 2 Sundays before the meeting. If you want to be on that list and are not on that list, send me a chat message with your email address. That list is only used for those 2 announcements, nothing else. Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
I guess, okay, that's it. So Rebecca and Andy are going to present a great program for us today, and we'll all get to participate.
Yeah.
Take it away.
All right. Okay, well, Rebecca and I agreed that I would start the conversation. And first of all, I hope everybody's doing well and staying safe and healthy and keeping busy. So today's a little different. As Rebecca said, it's a little bit different than a lot of the small firm forum events. There's not really any experts here. We don't have any experts presenting. The idea is that communication is something that we all have to do every day with various people, and that we can all learn from each other. And we've got a good group of people attending, and that we know that all of you have little tricks, little mantras, little stories of your practice that you can share with the group, and that we'll all kind of be sharing wisdom and come away from the hour having hopefully picked up a couple things about communication. So I thought I would just say a couple words about setting up the context. This kind of started because Rebecca and I were talking months ago about a weird situation that happened to me with a client, and we were talking about, well, how do you deal with this? And that kind of was the origin. And I'm not going to go into the details because I don't know you well enough. But we realized that communication is this intangible but really important element to having a successful project, and something we all have to do. So we came up with some questions that hopefully will generate some conversation. And I'll just read them off to you. Do you have a guiding philosophy or strategy with communication? Is it pretty much the same no matter what situation you're in or who you're communicating with? Is it different depending on whether you're talking with a client, a contractor, a consultant, a government official, a prospective client, a problem client? Are there particular situations or dynamics that you find difficult to communicate in? For example, in other words, they're kind of recurring problems for you in your practice. And then thinking about the underlying goals of good communication, protecting your design work and your design effort, persuading clients, making clients feel like they're being heard, setting boundaries for yourself, establishing trust, on and on. So there's lots of goals of good communication. And then one last thought I had before I'll kind of turn things over to Rebecca is, I think we'll be interested in hearing about the communication problems you faced since the pandemic started. And obviously we're dealing with one of them right here in this very moment. Like, you know, we used to be sitting at a table in the chapter's office to have our meetings, and now we're all doing this thing where we're looking at little pictures on a screen. And I think we'll all be interested in hearing about what communication problems have cropped up for you since March, and if you've come up with any good solutions for them. So that is, I think that's kind of setting the stage. And I think Rebecca and I wanted to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So Rebecca, I'll let you facilitate that.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm really glad everybody could come. Wow, we have 30 people. So I think what Andrew said, how he said that was great. You know, all these different situations we get into. And so Andrew and I had talked, like, I don't know, a year ago about some odd situations we've come up against. And, you know, I sort of realized that some of the more challenging experiences I've had in my 30 years of practice, you know, it hasn't been necessarily working out a schematic design that addresses every programmatic topic, or dealing with officials, or solving some contract language, but in communications, and really trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows their role, and keeping things smooth, you know, flowing smoothly. And so what I thought we would do first, to give people a little time to mull this all over, is to go around the Zoom room and introduce ourselves. And I would say, let's Mike, can you lose the, thanks. So let's introduce yourself and say your name and where your practice is, and just briefly describe your practice, and then let's use 3 words or less to describe what you love most, the one thing you love most about being an architect. Okay, so 3 words or less that describe the one thing you love about being an architect. And let me say, there are 27 people on this call, so let's, 10 seconds each. And I don't know why I'm not seeing everybody, but let's see, can I do this? Oh, God. All right, I guess, let's see, I'll go first, just to set the tone. I would say I love the multidisciplinary aspect of it, the creativity, and the interpersonal aspect. Linda?
Linda Randolph, Fremont, California, residential architecture, semi-retired. I love the freedom of being a sole practitioner and architect, because you can balance however you want with family, friends, obligations. And remind everybody should unmute themselves when they're talking.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Who's next? Andrew? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Andrew Lee. I have my own sole practice in Oakland. And the thing I love most about being an architect is that core task of drawing. That's why I got into architecture, because I love to draw. That's it. Rebecca, you need to unmute yourself again.
Richard, your turn, you're up. Sorry about that. You need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, I was just trying to find the unmute button. Wasn't in the picture. Richard Morrison, sole practice, completely residential at this point, working all over the Bay Area. Right now I'm sitting on a houseboat in Sausalito, which is lovely. I'd say really the only thing that's really getting my juice going these days is technology and seeing my ideas come alive virtually.
Thank you. Okay. Randolph.
I am not a practicing architect, but more what I would call a professor at large, because I've been lecturing around the world. Only last year I was in Pakistan for 2 keynote addresses, and then I was trapped there when Pakistan and India almost started a war with each other, and I then lectured in several universities, and so my communication really is learning how to communicate with students from other cultures. And then I was in Turkey and Istanbul, and then at Oxford, Cambridge, and London, and the 3 cities in Italy, including Rome, where my book on Rome got published. This is a picture from views by Piranesi that I photographed and have joined together into a single image.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Randolph. That's really exciting, really interesting. Donald.
The answer is, it's what I've wanted to do since I wrote a book report on Frank Lloyd Wright in the 7th grade. I'm an architect, 1-person company, residential, commercial, and industrial. That's it.
Okay. Charlene? Charlene, can you unmute? You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes. Carlene Anderson, and I run a kitchen design business. I'm not an architect, but we do a lot of residential space planning and draft up the blueprints and everything. And I just really love the interpersonal relationships of getting together with people and figuring out what's good for them.
Great. Thank you. Viet?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Viet. So I got started in architecture on the construction side. I grew up doing construction. So I would say, one word would be do construction. I have my sole practitioner in Oakland, and currently pursuing my my license as a contractor. So then we can actually build and develop our own projects.
Great. Okay, Carol, and we have a lot to get through, so let's try to sort of keep it to 3 words and move along. So Carol?
Carol Shen, and I actually spent most of my time as a managing principal at a really big firm, but retired, and helping friends. So the 3 words are problem solving, helping clients. It's not 3 words, 3 ideas, and then seeing the ideas implemented.
Cool. Okay. Rachel, you're up.
Hi, Rachel Sloniki, Berkeley, California. I would say creativity, coordination, and design.
Okay. Mr. Kurt. Thank you. Mr. Kurt.
3 words. Okay. I like independence.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Okay. Jerry.
Hello. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a preservation architect in Albany, California. And the 3 things I like are problem solving, traditional crafts, and Julie Morgan.
Yoo-hoo. Okay. Ines?
Ines. So I'm Ines Lejarraga. My practice is mostly residential, a little bit of commercial here and there. And I guess what I like most is collaborative design with other experts. Could be artisans or lighting designers or other related fields.
Cool. Thank you. Chris, coffee.
Hi, I'm a sole practitioner after many years with Graph Architects, and my 3 words are creative problem solving.
Okay. Josh.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm not an architect, I'm a structural engineer, but the three words that I like, I think apply to architecture as well. It's art, science, and service.
Art, science, and service. I don't know if everybody could hear him. Great, thank you. Kirsten.
Oh my, I'm not muted.
That's good.
I'm a residential architect, and I love organizing space according to others' ideas and being independent.
Okay. Ali? Thank you.
Hi, I live in Berkeley, and I think the ability to transform the environment is inspiring me.
Great, thank you. Kenny? Kenny?
Yes, I practice in Lafayette, and I guess my three things would be drawing, satisfaction of the client, and seeing it come into fruition.
Great, thank you. Mr. iPhone, I don't know who you are. That's you, who's leaning towards the screen. You don't have a name up. I don't recognize you. It's you. What is your name?
Daniel Guwich.
Okay.
I'm an architect in San Francisco. And my practice is actually about collaborative design process. So those are my three words.
Okay. Thank you. Rachel.
My name's Rachel Malco. I'm also in San Francisco. And my three words would be problem solving, being flexible in my life with the business and personal life, and helping my clients.
Oh, thank you. Mercedes, you need to unmute. Thank you. We can't hear you. All right, we'll go to Brian.
Speak into your microphone.
Doesn't work. Okay, Brian. He doesn't have his, I don't know, I'm not sure. Okay, Tatiana, are you there, Tatiana? Hi.
Hello.
Oh.
I'm a designer at Carolina Anderson Kitchen Design, and I like creating spaces and solving problems.
Okay, thank you. Mercedes, you want to go? Can you talk now?
Sure. And I'm sorry, the three words were the three things we like about our practice, or what were the?
Oh, what do you love most about being an architect?
Okay. I love to see something physical come out of a design. I love I love the process of making a space more beautiful and more functional. It's just like solving a puzzle. It's fun. And I like the interior aspect around color and materials.
Cool.
It gives me a lot of pleasure. Yeah.
Good. Brian? Brian?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello? Yes.
Yeah.
Brian Skrzyk. I work for Kinley Architecture and Planning, which is a small firm in San Francisco. I'm also an AIA East Bay board member, and I like relationships, creating and designing.
Cool. Thank you. Horig
wrote in the chat room. She doesn't have access to.
Oh.
She wrote her message in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. And she said, hi, I can only access the chat. My name is Horig A. McCrae. I'm an architect working on residential work now in the city of Oakland. What I love about the profession is the creative, interpersonal, and building relationships aspect. Okay? And Rebecca? The other Rebecca?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Rebecca. I have my own solo practice in Oakland doing commercial and residential work. And I love the relationship building with both the clients and the team. I love seeing an idea come to fruition and walking into the finished space. And I love the independence.
Cool. Okay. I think everybody's had a chance, I'm hoping. If you didn't talk now, speak now. No? Okay, I'm going to assume everybody had a chance. Cool. Well, that was enlightening. I mean, there's certainly a number of aspects that come up again and again. Cool. So what I thought we would do is to start a conversation, really a pretty open conversation about different communication tricks of the trade, maybe, or issues that have come up and how you've solved it. I guess one of the things that Andrew and I have talked about, and one of the questions, maybe can you bring up those questions just for one more moment so that we can look at those? Thank you. I think maybe this is a question that a lot of us come up against, or an issue is, how do we kind of keep control, maintain being the conductor of the project orchestra, if you will, and how, maybe you've been in a situation with, speaking from personal experience, a client and a GC, and the client starts turning to the GC for design input, making design decisions, and let's say I'm standing there and I'm like, why was I hired? How do I deal with this situation diplomatically? And what's the mantra, let's say, that I have to keep in mind? What is the how do I see this situation? Both that I want the client to be happy. Of course, I want the contractor to be happy and do a good job. I want to feel listened to and respected. So that's just an experience that I found tricky. So let's take a moment. I'd like to ask that we just take a moment. Everybody look at the questions. You might want to jot down some notes, and then we'll just start going around. And we can all mute ourselves and then raise your hand in the little, hopefully people know how to do that down at the bottom. If you click on the participants, actually, I don't have a raise hand thing now for some reason.
That's because you're a co-host.
Oh, got it.
You can encourage
Thank
people
you.
to add their questions in the chat. That's usually a good way to make sure everybody has a chance.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mike.
If you have a question, just type it into the chat.
Okay. And if you want to talk, if you have something to say, raise your hand. And so the way you do that is you go down to the bottom. It says Manage Participants, and you'll see a little blue hand, and you can click that, and then Andrew and I will see that, and we can call on you. Okay, so Linda, I see that you have your hand raised. Please.
Well, having been a contractor for 10 years of my practice, I think it's not a good thing to dismiss them. I think they can be an equal member of the conversation. And I've found very often that, I personally welcome good information from any source. And I don't pretend to know it all. And I think that's one important lesson is when you don't know, you say you don't know and you'll find out. But I think good information from any source is valuable. And so I don't ever feel like it's a competition to be heard or to silence someone.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Linda. And I think as architects, we have to be cognizant of when somebody is offering information that is sort of called for, and when people start bleeding into other categories, or, I'm not going to tell a contractor maybe how to put something together, or in what order to have his subs come in, right? And so we have to be mindful, we have to keep in mind when we feel maybe we are treading on somebody's toes, like maybe we feel like, oh my goodness, am I telling the client what they should think or how they should, what decision to make, like really forcing a decision on a client. So somebody else want to jump in following on this discussion?
I just wanted to echo what you said, Rebecca. I mean, I think, Linda, your point is really a good one. And there's this quote actually that I read a long time ago that by Lou Kahn, who said, always ask the guys who are building the thing, because they often have they know something you don't know. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think, and I've had this situation happen just recently, Rebecca, where construction starts and the contractor's on site much more often than you are, and based on whatever reason, their personality or their kind of interest in doing design work themselves, mm-hmm. all of a sudden you get the sensation of like, oh, wait a minute, they just talked about, they did a sketch yesterday and now they're going to do this thing in the kitchen. It's like so I think it's a point really well taken, Linda, that of course the contractor always has good feedback, but there are situations when you want to assert yourself as the designer, the designer on the project. So
yeah. Well, on the other hand, there's a thing about F the architect, and because this is a piece of paper that has instructions on it, even though they know a better way to do it or a better material or a better source, whatever, the contractor, if they're put down, will F the architect and just do it that way and let things play out in a bad way. So I think it's really just everybody being respectful of one another.
Mm-hmm.
May I chime in?
Yes, please.
So I having come from a background in construction, I do appreciate, Linda, your comments about the contractor having input as well. And so in the very beginning of my projects, I like to sort of set the tone with the client. They're sort of, initially it's the client, the architect. And so I like to foster that relationship and explain the process. There's really three stools to the whole leg. There's the client, there's the architect, and the GC. So I make it clear that our role as architects is to offer the design input and to mold the design based on the requirements from the client. And then the contractor will come in and build it based on the priorities that we set. But during construction, it's a team effort. We as architects don't look good until the project is built and looks fantastic. So it's really a team effort. But I've been in those difficult situations where contractors will say, we've got to change the ceiling because the plumbing, the venting, has to go from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to change the entire design. Well, I like, in that instance, I heard their concerns, but I've offered a different solution, which is instead of going from point A to point B directly, mm-hmm. lowering the ceiling, maybe we go sort of backwards and around, and then we're not affecting the ceiling, which ultimately was a solution. But I think everybody likes to be heard. So hearing the concerns from the contractor, and that's what we're trained as architects, is to offer creative solutions, but maybe judge that against the original criteria which the client set out for, mm-hmm. And giving that as a check. So
yeah, well said. I think that's super helpful. Yeah, and some of that I found personally that if you have a pre-construction meeting, I mean, you have to really make sure the client understands what you were saying from the beginning, and then have a pre-construction meeting also where you're laying out the legs of the stool, if you will. Kurt, did you want to jump in?
Unmute, yes. Yeah, I wanted to just zoom. I agree with everything that's been said. I also used to be a contractor, so I'm familiar with sort of both sides of this equation. I totally agree with the fuck the architect thing. And in fact, often one of the things I'll do when a relationship is new with a contractor, so I'll come to the job and you can tell they're frustrated with something and I'll be like, oh, what did the fucking architect put down here? And they'll all look at me for a second like, and then they'll laugh, you know, which releases a lot of tension. And then now we're on a little bit different ground because I have been the first one to undercut whatever illusions they think I might have about my superiority, you know?
Nice.
And that kind of gets to fear. I think all bad communication results from fear. And so I think the more we support each other, and we're all talking about different ways of doing it, and one is walking in with confidence in yourself and your own design, not cocky confidence, but the confidence that's well-founded in the fact that we've probably already built this thing in our head 10 times. We know it better than anyone else. And then respecting that the contractor has built things 10 times more than we have, and then immediately looking for like a way to respect and support each other. And I think that helps build client confidence because clients tend to panic when they see the kids fighting. You know, and when they see the architect and the contractor contradicting each other, they get nervous. Then they try to become the expert. I have had many clients that start to try to take over and either referee or weigh, you know, they think they've got to take the wheel. And that's usually bad when they do that. We're not supporting them well, which, you know, should be one of our jobs. And they're not going to drive well because they don't know what they're doing. And so we sort of all let each other down that way. And so I try to just zoom out and always be checking like, whoa, did he say that? Or did she really do that? What are they afraid of? I really try to back up and go, what are they afraid of? And sometimes I realize it's me. Like we have more power and are more of a threat than we realize sometimes. We show up maybe feeling insecure about the job, and yet the contractor's really insecure that they're going to get blamed for something. Mm-hmm. The owner's really insecure that they're going to get charged for everything twice. And so, you know, when I feel like things are going sideways, I really try to check and see, get back to where people are. You know, that's like the fucking architect comment. Align myself with whatever position they're in, and now they feel like I'm next to them and we're going to work it out together. And that changes the tone of everything. Whatever the specifics are from there out, it changes its underlying feeling tone of the group and how they treat each other. And it becomes more of a mission for all of us to make it to the other side successfully. So
thanks, Kurt. That's super helpful, super interesting. I think Richard had his hand up next.
Thank you. I think Viet missed the fourth leg of the stool, which is the decorator friend of the client, which you didn't even know existed, and who turns out to be even more powerful than the others combined. I think the one communication situation that I have a really hard time with is showing up on the job site and things are completely different than I had drawn. And I just don't even know what to say at that point. I guess my mantra is, well, if you get 80% of what you intended, be happy. But I don't have much more beyond that.
Can I ask you something about that, Richard?
Sure.
I think that's really, you're raising a funny point that does happen. When that's happened to you, you arrive at a job site and, you know, it's going off track from what you designed. In hindsight, do you ever think, oh, I should have done X or Y or Z and that would have prevented this from happening?
No, I seldom have that because it's usually something that was very clear on the plans, but somebody decided to change it. It could have been the client, could have been the contractor, but I was never even asked for my opinion before the change happened.
Right.
And
But
once it's built, you know, what can you do?
But I mean, do you feel like, oh, I could have been more forceful, for example, or I could have been more, I could have had more like buy-in from the client that this is the best way to be done, and you know, something along those lines.
Well, I'll give you an example of something that happened early in my career. I was doing a little craftsman bungalow, and I showed up, and the contractor decided that it was much nicer to put in bullnose corners everywhere. And, you know, it looked kind of like a Southwest Adobe house or something. But it was everywhere. You know, and so what do you do at that point?
I know. Okay. Yeah, Richard, I think a lot of us has been there. Carol, I know you want to speak, but I'm trying to go in order of people raising their hand. I think Donald, there's several people, so if you can, it's all super interesting, but we need to kind of let people talk. Donald, where are you?
I don't think the basis of misunderstanding is fear, even though I respect everything Kurt has ever said. But that, to me, maintaining a clear understanding is the whole issue. So you've seen two people talk sometime, right? This person thinks they're saying one thing. This person hears something else, right? So the problem is, how do you actually have a level of communication where what is said is what is understood? And in my opinion, that requires looking at yourself a little bit, because it's not going to be the same way for every person. I think one of your questions, Rebecca, at the beginning was, you know, something, a terrible event you had in the beginning or something like that, or an eye-opening event. For me, it was when I was hardly even licensed, so it had to be 30 or 40 years ago. And my boss took me to a public meeting for a project that I was heavily involved with and wanted me to speak. That didn't go very well. I mean, you know, he never asked me to do that again. And so the point here is that there are styles of communication that are most effective for people that vary by person. So you have to know what is your effective style of communication, in my opinion. So, you know, if we worked in different environments, we've probably seen, for example, some people who verbally will do the whole thing. It's by phone or by face, and they manage to make the project go smoothly like that. There are other people who are it's more visual. And so they want to see the idea down on a piece of paper. And once it's down on the piece of paper, it can't be misconstrued because there it is. And so I think it's a matter of a little bit of knowing where you fall in this continuum. And so I don't have a problem with communication, but it's because I'm really not trying to get things verbal. I think that the results can be too equivocal. I'm really more interested in things on paper. So that's my drawings. Most of my projects are built almost exactly like the drawings. And also in terms of communication, I get maybe one phone call a day, you know, but there might be 10 emails. And so there is a consistency in the understanding and the project record.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, you had your hand up next, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear all this, all these stories from other people, because, you know, I'm glad I'm not the only one. But yeah, I haven't. I mean, basically, my practice is I formulated this practice in terms of the collaborative design process, because I figured, you know, you have to work with everybody, and you have to establish that from the beginning with the client. You know, I say, you know, this is the contractor has his ideas. This is these are my responsibilities. These are their responsibilities. These are your responsibilities as an owner. You know, and there's other people coming into the project. You know, so. You know, I personally haven't had any problems with contractors in my projects. You know, I've seen them in my professional experience at working with other firms where, you know, where I've seen the contractor be like, oh, here comes the architect. And, you know, it's like, And I've noticed right away, it's like, why do we have to have the adversarial approach? Why can't we just work with these people? And these old time architects are like, we're the architect, they're the contractor, there was always this fight between them, this tension. And then, eventually during the CA processes, I had started relationships with these contractors and the field, and talking to them and really taking an interest in their ideas and what they're doing, and learning from them and asking them questions. How should I? Well, I've detailed this way. I should probably be detailing it that way after knowing how you do this. So it's interesting, and I said, I really think architects, we should be working together, and and a lot of these project managers and associate principals actually noticed to me that like, you have a great relationship with these people. I was like, yeah, you have to. These are people, they have tons of information. We go to school, we learn all this stuff. But these guys are working and welding, and they're like doing all this stuff. And there's so much to learn from them. And it's just that's how I started my practice. It's like I say I really want to bring that, work with these people and be a team player. And it's like it takes a team to put these additions or ADUs together. They're tiny projects, but they still have a team of people, and you have to get along. And you're basically, it's like you're a family, and the owner, and you're together for like a year
at least. Right.
Yeah, and hopefully the cities have been taking a long time, but
Thanks,
yeah,
Daniel.
that's yeah.
So collaborating and having an open mind, and I think what you're saying also is maybe trying at the get-go to define people's roles. Yes. And be respectful. Be respectful. Yeah.
And
thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Zach. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Inez. I'm sorry.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
So I guess I was like thinking I've had these issues before myself, but then I'm like, and I'm thinking towards my sort of projects that I've got going on now, and I have sort of a bigger issue, which is that they haven't agreed for me to stay on through CA, right? So I'm like, okay, well, if I can't get them to agree that like I'm valuable to even be there, like the whole question of whether or not like they're going to change something during construction because I didn't see it on Tuesday is irrelevant. So I was just wondering how you guys deal with that issue.
That's a really good question. I'd love to hear how people deal with that. Josh, are you addressing that? Did you want to say something about that?
Of course I can say something about that.
We can't hear you. Can you
hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Of course I can say something about that. That goes to the first issue, the thing I find most challenging, which is the first thing is a general contractor with a can-do attitude. And whenever I see a general contractor with a can-do attitude, I understand that person doesn't know what he's doing. In order to get the job done right, every participant has to admit their areas of ignorance. And a contractor with a can-do attitude just negates that whole thing. As far as what Inez said, what I do with regard to not being hired to provide construction or structural observation services for my projects, I try not to take those jobs. But if it turns out, because every contract I'm on, I include structural observation services in the agreement. If they don't call me for it, because I don't go voluntarily, I go only when I'm called. They don't call me for it, and I don't get to observe something that I'm supposed to be responsible for. I write a letter to the building official, and I say I wasn't given the opportunity to provide structural observation services that were required by the contract, and therefore I'm no longer the engineer of record. So I tell the client that if they don't have me look at it, then I have to disassociate myself from the project, and they paid me all that design money, yet they don't have an engineer. So it's not to their advantage to do that. It's best for the whole project if we as professional, design professionals, see the project through, because we are an important part of the project.
Yeah.
So the other thing the challenging communication situations or moral dilemmas. One of the dilemmas is where a client thinks of engineering as just a commodity. Here's an engineer X who charges $3,000, and here's an engineer Y who charged $45,000, and they're thinking this is the same exact project, and it's obviously not. Those are specific numbers that I refer to in a project of mine. So, you know, but a client doesn't see the difference. So that's a challenge. The other challenge is where engineering is seen as just a permit requirement, not as engineering as a valuable professional service that is provided for the benefit of the project as a whole. So there's a couple more notes, but I've taken enough time.
Thank you, Josh. Super. Yeah, it's good to get your perspective as an engineer. Thank you. Carol. Finally, Carol. Carol?
Yeah, I just had to find unmute. Going back, a couple of words jumped out from listening to all these wonderful inputs. And one is when Kurt mentioned the word well-founded. And I think the flip side of well-founded is unknowingly. And I think where design, sorry about that, where design can seem really arbitrary. Sometimes architects, and these are on bigger projects, where you have very specific expertise, and I feel like it's like, do you believe the science? You know, is there expertise? Do you really know from experience that, you know, that's really not going to work as well as something else? So I think I found myself in situations where on projects where there are really important site constraints, and you can't just say, well, it'll look better if we do this. It might impede the function of something else. That trying to communicate something unknowingly that's going to screw something else up really can cause a breakdown in communication. So dealing with the unknowingly changing something is probably can only be counteracted by coming up with well-founded reasoning. And it, you know, not that, oh, the architect just wants it that way. There is the science behind it, is the expertise, the experience, and the reasons why. So that's all I wanted to.
Yeah. That's so Carol, do I understand you correctly that you're saying, when you talk about science, are you saying that when we as architects are suggesting something, that we have to be articulate and give a reason that that is clear to the client?
Functional, operational, durability, you know, long-term, green, being sensitive, you know, there are issues that we're responding to, and the more we can address it, the more well-founded, right, Kurt? I mean, if it's well-founded, not arbitrary, that's where you earn the respect. And having worked, you know, on projects where there are other architects, like another architectural firm, you're the design architect and you've come up with the concept, and then they just start changing things because they have better ideas. It's like, you can't lose the science. You can't lose what it was founded on, you know, because you're designing things on principles. And so I think, and I liked Richard's comment about, what about the fourth leg of the stool, the fifth leg, the sixth leg, you know? There's the traffic issue, there's the, you know, circulation issues, there's the drainage issues, structural, civil. There are lots of legs to this table. And I think communication can be enhanced when you're not only collaboration, but when it's well-founded. And that well-founded you can define in lots of different ways. And to get into these other problems that were on your list, there are other stories of where, you know, something well-founded was unknowingly changed.
Yeah, right.
Hey,
Thanks, Carol.
Rebecca.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. We
I
can
was
say
gonna,
something back to Carol.
oh, I could, but I won't. Kirsten, can you wanted to say something? You haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, just I guess just briefly wanted to respond to a few things that I've heard. So one thing I do is work with the structural engineers really early on. Oftentimes, even before I have a signed contract, I bring a structural engineer out and look at the project and just the basic ideas, because the structural work has such a huge impact on the feasibility and the construction cost. And so having a good relationship with the structural engineer is important. So it's really clear that that is a very important part of the work, in a very important person in the team, in my team. Then I wanted to say something about the interior designer issue. I had that come up, that my clients came to me and wanted to bring an interior designer on, and I immediately had this feeling that, well, you know, I don't really know maybe how to communicate with them. We had a difficult time about some of that. And then I thought, yeah, sure, I'm open to working with an interior designer. They asked me, and I thought they did it because they wanted to save money, you know, because the interior designer was going to give them a fixed fee to deal with the whole interior part. And I said, it's okay as long as that interior designer communicates with me anything that has to do with the things that are on my drawings that affect this, you know, specifically. And so I'm not going to do that again, because a person only knows what they know and they don't know what they don't know. So she didn't know that she was not communicating with me. So she came up with, changing the cabinet. We ended up paying for prefab cabinets more than the custom cabinets would have costed, and they couldn't accomplish what we were going to do, which was really surprising. I would not have guessed that. Eventually the clients told me they wouldn't have hired her. And my mistake was, I was kind of timid instead of more forthcoming. So I feel like, you know, that was to Andrew's question. I felt that if I had been more, you know, just more outgoing with them, that would have really helped. And I underestimated the amount of money that they were willing to put into it. It turned out they really wanted it the way they wanted it, and not like, oh, you know, it's getting too expensive. So I made some assumptions, and I didn't have the guts to identify the reality around those. So it's all good now, but and I had another problem where we had a prefab railing, and then we ended up doing a custom railing. And I can tell you, a custom railing is so expensive to design. And the design is just, every corner had to be designed. Every post was different.
I've seen her drawings. They're fabulous. She really is.
Anyways, it was, so, and that's another, anyway, so that I keep having, you know, a lot of fears around that, but I haven't run into the problem that I didn't get paid. So, and then the last thing I wanted to talk to, oh yeah, this issue about contractors. So I was working for a company, and they were telling me how they didn't want to go to the job site because the plumber was so scary. And so when I went to the job site, this plumber was going to be there, and I had this vanity that was wall hung and had a whole window over it, right? So they have to do this complicated venting, and there's no space for their stuff. And so I just walked in and said, yeah, I'm the one that makes your life difficult. And he's like, oh, I have no problem solving this. You know, I got it. So it was fine. Like I didn't have a, so anyways, that's just what I wanted to share. Thanks.
That's great, Kirsten. That's really good. Yeah. Sort of being disarming, and yeah. It's like, I'm not a jerk. I'm not doing this just to make your life difficult and just because I think it's beautiful. This is, yeah. Cool. Thanks. So let's see, Kurt and Daniel, you both have your hands up. Who wants to go first? Daniel?
I have to go.
Let's go first.
Go first, because I have to jump off.
Oh, you have to jump off, Kurt?
Yeah, so can I just say something quickly?
Yes, sure.
And actually, part of it is, I loved Daniel's enthusiasm about the craftspeople on the job, the collaborating, being excited about their work, what they know, what we can learn from them. One, I think it's part of the fun of what we do. I learn so much on every job. And two, it's just, again, it circles back to respect for the other people. So if you get really excited about the way the electrician's running the wires or the welder pulled off some trick connection, they become like a font of knowledge and information. They're so excited to be recognized. And I think we all have that. And so I try to do that on jobs because I think that, you know, you need permission to lead. We all consider ourselves the leaders of these jobs, but you need permission, and you earn permission through respect of the other people. And the last thing I'll say is, I think that we're all pretty good at making friends with the clients up front and having them fall in love with us. But too many of us participate in, are complicit in torturing the contractors up front and making their work a commodity and putting stuff out for 3 and 5 competitive bids. And we should be against that because we don't want to be treated like a commodity. Engineers don't want to be treated like a commodity. Why would contractors want to be treated like a commodity and beat down on price and selected just on price? And why would that not lead to them going, okay, fuck it, I'm not gonna bid the stuff that the architect left out that I know they're gonna need. I'll just change order it later at twice the price. Like it begins an adversarial relationship. So I think that's something we have to be really careful about.
I'm just going to jump in here. Kurt, I think that is a really interesting topic for another meeting. I mean, I love that. Like, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with contractors and trying to get numbers out of them and being respectful of their time? And is that really part of the cost of business? And I mean, I just love that. So maybe that's another discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, we go first, right? We set the tone.
Yeah.
Or some team of us and the owners sets the tone.
Right.
And I bring in contractors early, and I have a feeling most of us do, and make them feel part of the team and all that. And that's really important because then they have a vested interest. They're part of establishing what things should cost. But even then, sometimes it still looks to them like a game of, I need to figure out how to make this cheaper. And that's a commodities game. And I think most of us are in custom work, which is not a commodities game. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing this. I'm going to click off. I got to go to a job and tell everybody they don't know shit and they should all listen to me.
Good luck with that, Kurt. Do it. Okay. I wanted to call on Chris because he hasn't had a chance to talk yet. I hope that's okay with Daniel and Josh, who also have their hands up. Chris?
Yeah. I wanted to just touch on something that Kurt said. Too bad he's gone, but we'll talk about it some other time. The idea that you can steer clients towards working with the contractor that you enjoy working with and that they're going to be okay with that. I think it just doesn't work practically. Most of my clients, they're doing this construction process for the first time, and they approach it with a great deal of skepticism in terms of cost and process. And so part of alleviating that is just being open and trying to recommend multiple contractors that you think will all do a good job and are about in the right same price range, and then working that list down to one by fit and interviewing and between the client and the contractor and choosing based on fit, and hopefully cost is somewhat comparable. And then in terms of good communication and walking on site, I think it's important to approach a new contractor with humility and just trying to be as receptive as possible and listening to what they have to say instead of professing what you think they need to hear. Once you've worked with a contractor multiple times, that stuff becomes unnecessary, but it's those the first time relationships that can be the more difficult ones.
Yeah.
In terms of a personal experience with a challenging communication element of a job. It's really more, my anecdote is really more of an owner that that had memory issues, and so we ended up rehashing things a lot, and it took a great deal of patience just to kind of get through that, and lots of phone calls. And I think the key is you can really discuss a lot of information on the phone, and then a quick follow-up email that just summarizes briefly what you talked about is a good way to have something to point to later, without overwhelming them with emails and stuff in writing that sometimes scares people because they think it's so formal. That's really all I have to contribute.
That's good, Chris. No,
everyone's got lots of good things to say. I don't have much better ways of putting it than has already been said.
Well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I think that is another topic that's really interesting of how do you keep track of all, like if you're doing 5 jobs, 6 jobs, Andrew just said he's doing like 6 jobs at once, and things are in CA, and how do we, how much can we trust our memory if you're juggling like 6 jobs, 3 in construction all simultaneously, and what software, that's another subject, but and who said what, how do you keep track of all that? I'm gonna, Daniel, I know I'm putting you off again. Can I call on Rebecca, if you don't mind, because she hasn't had a chance. Thank you, Daniel. Rebecca?
I don't mind if Daniel goes first. I know he's been waiting.
No? Okay. No, go ahead, Rebecca. I'm taking executive.
Okay, sure. So I actually have I'm just curious if anyone has had this kind of situation. For the first time, I have a little bit of an unusual dynamic where I was brought in to a small commercial project as so the clients have hired a kind of project manager, owner rep person, who is somebody who I knew. And he brought me in as the architect. He introduced them to me. I think they probably met with a couple other architects, and they hired me. But it's been so he's also has a background as a developer and a GC. And so he has a lot of really valuable information, and I'm glad he's on the project from the beginning because he's able to kind of spitball numbers in a way that I certainly cannot. However, the power dynamic is very different because he is, he's asking me to send plans to him before I send them to the client. He's asking me to send, even though my contract is actually directly with the client, I'm not sub to him, but he's asking me to send him my invoices so he can review them before I send them to the client. And now I know I could argue that, and I'm not legally obligated to do that, but I'm doing it more as a courtesy because he did bring me in, and I'm just kind of, not rocking the boat at this point. So I'm just curious, but I do also notice that it's slowing down the project, and there's more scope confusion, like who's going to submit it. He wants to be the applicant, so the building department will give him comments, and then he'll pass them on to me. So I feel like I may have actually underestimated the cost of this, just because all the coordination is going to, having an extra person is actually adding more time, coordination time to the project. So I'm curious if anyone has ever worked on a project where there's been kind of, because I usually introduce myself to the clients as kind of the ringleader of the circus, and I'm the project manager as well as the architect. So I don't know, anyone have any and nothing has gone badly yet. It seems fine so far. It's making me a little nervous.
All I can say is managing expectations. I mean, Rebecca, I would just say I haven't had that exactly, except that I did have a situation where the client was acting as if the GC was supposed to tell me when to move forward with, like, oh, the GC says go from schematics to DD. I'm like, I'm not going to listen to the GC. We have to be clear on who's communicating here, who's giving me directions. But I'm curious, has anybody had this situation?
Actually, I want to make a comment on that. It reminds me a lot about when you have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor, and in our specs, I think in a regular boilerplate specs, or it's not my specs, but in general, there's like this first division 1 or the general requirements. There's always a section about defining the team roles, the individual roles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a I feel like it's if you have that situation, it's like I would probably, I guess, communicating that to the client, or what are the team roles, like, you know, maybe the client's like, you know, you have a contract with me, but I want you to talk to this guy. He's going to be in charge because I don't know anything. I'm pushing a lot of responsibilities to there's kind of like a construction manager agent sort of role. So
yeah, I think like, you get it in writing from the client that I am to take direction from this one person, and I don't need to check with you with everything this person says. He is essentially becoming my client. And if that's not exactly how the chain of command is going to operate, we need to figure this out. Because it's like, I'm sure I've had clients where you got the couple, husband and wife, and you're getting two different, you know, I mean, that was way back when I was starting out. And, you know, I've had to say, I will take direction from one of you. It's not my responsibility to be the couples counselor and go back and forth and try to find out which way I'm supposed to do this. Right? I'm sorry, I jumped in there. Josh and then Inez. Josh, do you want to?
Trying to unmute. Yeah, I unmuted. Okay. Yeah, I agree with what you just said, Rebecca. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
I always, when I'm approached by a potential client and they're actually one of a couple, I always ask for the other partner to also be involved. I have both of them sign the agreement, not one of them, because I've had problems where I've been dealing mostly with one of the spouses, and she's told me what to do, and she and I have agreed on what I was doing. And then I send a bill, and the other spouse says, "No, we're not going to pay that because I didn't ask you to do it." So,
right.
So, but that's just an aside. I wanted to first of all say to Daniel, you had mentioned earlier that you're glad you're not the only one who talked about these things, and I just wanted to say that's the value of these kinds of forums, that we get together and say that we're not alone, that we're all experiencing similar things, and we can help each other get through it. And for Kirsten, I want to thank her so much for calling the structural engineer in early. I wrote a piece in the AIA newsletter a number of years ago about that very thing, and I think it's important for the project. I think bringing a general contractor in early is also a good thing. And your comment about whether that's part of the cost of doing business, I think you meant cost of the contractors doing business. And I don't see it that way anymore. I think that pre-design or pre-construction services provided by a contractor, services provided during design, are a valuable service that are worthy of a professional fee. Very often the contractor would charge, you know, $1,000 for all the pre-construction services, which I don't think might be enough for the help that they give. The downside of having the contractor in early is that they could be steering the project, the construction techniques and materials towards the work that they're most familiar with. So they're kind of biasing the construction documents to favor their bids. But I don't think that's as big a problem as one can fear, because every contractor has his or her own strengths and weaknesses, and also their prices that they come up with are not just based on the labor rates and the cost of materials, but also on their own market position.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Josh. I want to stick within sort of the frame of communication here. Inez?
One more thing with regard to communication. I think it's important, if I could, it's important to understand that our documents are depicting the final product, the building as it's supposed to be when it's done. We don't necessarily define the means and methods, and that's where the contractor is very important. I mean, that's what the contractor does. That's where the contractor makes the money. One thing that Donald said something about showing that this is what we want them to do. It's not really what we want them to do unless we're specifying a means and methods. It's what we want it to look like when they're done doing what they do.
Well, yeah. Inez, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, Inez.
Inez.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess a comment on a few of those things. So I was wondering if anybody had tried to hire the interior designer or a landscape architect themselves. And that way, if they're under you, then you could have some control over them, right? Like the standard thing is that standard possibilities that you might hire a structural engineer, but thus far, I've had zero issues coordinating my structural engineers, even though they're not under my contract, whereas, like interior designers are much more problematic. So just wondering if anybody's tried to do that.
Can I just say, I've got a situation where people have hired me to design an acre property, and this is exactly what I'm thinking of now. Like, I don't, they want me to do it. I don't feel completely confident. I mean, I'm certainly not going to do the plant selection, and I'd rather select the landscape architect, but it's a good question. I'm just saying, because I'm having it.
Yeah, well.
So.
And then as far as the structural engineer, I think the things that I tell my clients is valuable for a structural engineer is whether or not they're willing to coordinate for the purpose of design and try out more than one option. And then for the purpose of sometimes, if economy is a bigger thing for them, is economy. And then also speed, because I've had a lot of engineers that are just like excruciatingly slow or have even just sort of disappeared off of projects. And so to me, that would be the add value as a structural engineer that I would try to sell. And then I guess I'm kind of curious, what's the, you say, okay, well, maybe we just, don't take jobs where they don't hire us for CA, but that's tricky in this economy. So what's the sell add value that we should use to sell ourselves during CA? So
Donald, do you want to address that last issue? Because I wanted to say something about it, but
Can I say something about that too, Rebecca?
Yes, please.
Okay. I've been holding on to this question, Ines, because you brought it up a couple of times where, for whatever reason, the client doesn't want, is saying, oh no, we don't need you doing CA. And this is a very nuts and bolts piece of feedback, and I don't know why this took me so long, but I now have a clause in my contract that says my scope of work includes construction administration services. However, if the client elects not to retain me for those services, they waive all claims against me or any claim arising out of construction. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize I can just put that in my contract. But, and knock on wood, it doesn't happen that often, I don't think, in single family, because, we're all dealing with kind of unsophisticated clients in a non-derogatory way. And they want you to be involved in construction, but every once in a while you have someone who says, oh no, we're good, thank you. And I'm so glad I have that provision in my contract now.
Cool. Donald?
Yeah, I want to talk about two things. One, in response to Inez, my contract says what consultants I will hire and what the owner will hire. And generally speaking, I prefer to hire the consultant myself. If it's a landscape architect, definitely a structural engineer. I want these people to answer the phone when I call, and I don't want to have split loyalties. And I'm very collaborative when I work with these people, and I respect them, but there's that. The second thing that I wanted to mention is I have some names of those of you who are AIA members. I'm going to read the list. If any of you need to be on this list for continuing education, send me a chat. So it's Carol, Rachel Malchow, Richard Viet, Jerry, Brian, and Inez.
Me. You have me, right?
Okay. No, now I do.
Thanks, Donald.
Okay.
Jerry Holden, I'd love to hear from you. I know you have years and years of experience, and you haven't. Is there something that you would, I know you're kind of busy, but can you?
Well, I'm kind of working as everybody's talking. I actually usually have a very good relationship and rapport with the contractors. And I try to explain everything really clearly to the clients. you know, so that they know, you know, if I'm not involved, what the repercussions might be. I mean, because it is always down to that. Do they want to pay my fee? They've already spent thousands of dollars on me to get the building permits. Do they really need me now? Well, no, they probably don't. Residential work isn't rocket science. However, there are implications and cost implications. And if they want it to look like, you know, the way my drawings show it, then I should be involved. But I just tell them I'm by the hour and as needed. I don't say I'm going to come out there every week or every 2 weeks. And I think what the other person said, I can't remember who it was that they do want us to be involved during construction administration. There's still decisions that are going to be having to be made, you know. So I kind of look at I think I look at as the owner and the contractor and the architect as kind of a team with 3 legs, and we all kind of work with each other. I do have a client now. It's not going that way, but I've been working with them way too long. I'm not sure where it's going to go after they hire the contractor. I might just step out and let it go, you know. But you know, most of the time. So I think it's just being positive and explaining everything. So that's my 2 bits for communication with clients. But you know, I'm not saying it's always successful, but it's worked so far.
Good. Thanks, Jerry. Yet, were you raising your hand in person?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. And
then, I wanted to respond to Rebecca's comment about asking about a project manager. And it ties in with this idea of who's contracting with the structural engineer. And I do want to second Andrew's comment about putting construction in the contract. I've got that in my contract as well. And I highly recommend everyone does that same.
I just want to say, you know, some of these conversations I think would be great to take offline. I mean, because some of this is really about contract language and, you know, how to do specific things that aren't strictly communication. I know we have to get going shortly. So I'm just going to say, does anybody else have something they feel they really want to share with the group that has to do with tricky communication, like face-to-face or email communications or something like that, that's more sort of how do you talk to yourself about dealing with something, or, you know, when you've really had to think about the interpersonal issues. Mercedes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, sorry, Viet. Maybe you had something that you were on that.
Please.
So, you know, it's communication with the project manager. So, you know, my experience with them is they've got a separate contract under the client umbrella. And so you know, they're supposed to make the process go easier because the client may not be so educated with the whole process and they might be so super busy. So I've dealt that with like very, you know, big commercial projects or high-end residential. So again, they're supposed to make your life easier. Sometimes it seems like, Rebecca, they're making your life a little bit more complicated. But I would, you know, in terms of design decisions, I would, you know, communicate directly with the client, because that has to do with a lot of the decisions you make as a design. I find them very helpful is during construction, because there's a lot of technical information that needs to be conveyed. And so, you know, they'll review the invoices, etc. But I think where it has a big impact on the project, design oriented, that definitely needs to go to the client. And it's not the project manager in that case or the client's rep to make the decision. But that's it. That's in terms of communication. I would say what's important is go to the client.
Thanks. Great. Mercedes.
Okay, so just briefly, I'll note that I had a project last year with a client, and it was a pretty small project. They explained what they wanted, but what I found in the end was, even though I thought we were communicating well, something got missed. And in the sense that the client, you know, I don't know if it was getting missed visually, like the plans were too abstract, and there were definitely some different views between the husband and wife, but it just was in schematic design, exploring some options for how to fit a bathroom into an existing house. And there were initial stage had some tricky planning things that we sorted out, but I don't even have an answer for this, but I think that sometimes it's important, even when something seems really basic, because it was a very simple project, to somehow, as this kind of note to self, remind myself to kind of reiterate things as simply as possible. Check, does this making sense? Because I never picked up that there was anything she wasn't understanding or confused about until it was, and there were some other things happening, I think, when she ended up maybe not being able to do the project. But I just feel like, because I or we do this all the time and have been doing it for so long, occasionally there are clients that actually aren't understanding the plans the whole time, but maybe they don't say that. And so we can't really solve this problem, but maybe there are ways we can kind of diagnose it or notice it. And I feel like that was maybe part of it. And also, I usually work with a cost estimator that I'm paying, one of the contractors, if they're available, and I like to pay them to give me some input as we go. She had somebody she wanted to work with, but that person never materialized to do this task. So I think what happened at the end is she maybe showed one of the, and there were all the designs, there was like the really cheap way to do it all the way up to a more expensive way. So all the options were covered. But I think she might have gotten a more expensive price at the end for maybe the one she liked. Obviously, this has something to do with that client too, but I guess I feel like on the projects, it's good to figure out ways to make sure people are really on board or on track, or that you're synced up. I don't have any answers on this one. Usually it feels like it goes more smoothly, but sometimes these glitches happen.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm gonna say you're gonna be the last one because we're running out of time. This has been a great discussion. I so appreciate everybody's input. I know we have lots to share, and it's so helpful for all of us. Rebecca?
Yes, hi. Okay, so one other communication thing that has been one of the hardest things for me over the last few years has been when I do have to, during construction, when I do get to the site and something has been built incorrectly or a change has been made that actually has a very significant impact, kind of what Carol was talking about, the unintended impacts that the contractor isn't thinking about. And this just happened to me like a week and a half ago. I'm working on a bar and they built the bar in the wrong place, or they built it 2 feet too long and a foot too wide. And it was because the GC wasn't overseeing his framers very closely. And they were like, oh, it's okay, it'll just be a bigger bar. But in fact, there was a column on the other side of the bar. So it meant there wasn't going to be enough room for seating. There wasn't enough room for ADA clearances and right away and all of that. And so I had to tell, and they just framed the bar. They hadn't applied the finishes or the top, but they had wired it already with the underbar lighting. And I had to tell them to take it out. I said, you're going to have to rip it out. And that's one of the hardest things for me. And it like gives me this just wrenching turning in my stomach when I have to tell a contractor to tear something out that they've already built. And I don't know if it's just because I'm finding my confidence with that still, or if that always does everyone experience that like gut wrenching feeling when you have to tell a contractor to tear something out and rebuild it?
That is a great question. Can anybody, Linda, I just think that's such a great question. I'm going to let this conversation go on a little bit more, and I understand if anybody needs to cut out, but I'm trying to wrap it up, but I really love that question, Rebecca. So, Linda?
And just to say, I've let a lot of little things slide. It's like only this.
Yeah. Linda, do you want to address that? We can't hear you. Linda, you need to unmute. Oh.
There we go. If your name doesn't appear with the AIA and you want it to automatically go to the AIA, the upper right corner of your screen, you click on the 3 dots and it brings down a file and it says rename. So many of you don't have AIA after your name and would not get credit for it. So you can rename it very easily.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone want to address, going back to Rebecca's question about how do you tell you know, how do you tell a contractor that, sorry, but it's too far off? Because I think we've all been in the situation where it's a little thing, okay, we'll make it work. We will make it work. And then of course it's like, well, if it takes, you know, our design time, you know, who gets billed for that? If the contractor screws up something and you have to spend time fixing their problem or making their mistake, okay, how do you deal with that? But also, how do you tell a contractor, nope.
I think you need to have I've been in that situation where it's like, you know, one thing here, one thing there, and then it becomes a bigger thing. And you have to have I ultimately had a conversation with the owner, because I said right away, because I said, I can't let this thing, you know, another hour go by, because, you know, then I become liable. So it's like, I have them involved and basically do the entire, you know, tell them what's going on and the documentation. You know, and this is what's happened this day and this day, you know, and I, you know, and I approach it in a collaborative manner. I'm not like, oh, this guy is screwing your project up. You know, it's like, you know, this is what we documented, you know, this is what's on site, you know, like, it's one of, you know, what do we do? You know, and this is our solutions. Like, he's either has to change it, or he has to, you know, or you have to approve. Ultimately, the owner has to approve, you know, say you're okay with it. Or if we had to rectify it, because in this case it was they framed the wall incorrectly, so we couldn't get the R value. So, you know, we either do a double stud wall, or, you know, or we have to go back to the energy consultant. You know, the energy consultant got involved. We had a phone call with them. They said, this is what you're getting, you know, what you should be expecting. And if the contractor's billing it this way, you're not going to get this right performance in the building. You're going to hit your addition. It's going to get too hot or whatever. So, you know, yeah, it's just, I think you have to judge it at a point. I mean, sometimes it's like little things and you bring it up and it's like, fine. Okay, well, sometimes we do like, okay, well, I let you have this one. You got to let me have it kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like you have to team play, or, you know, or just, you need to bring it up right away with the owner. The owner has to be, you know, they're the one paying, and they're the ones who are living with the building, and we're, you know, we walk away to the next project and we don't live there. So.
And if it is their fault and they have to fix it, how do you make sure they're not billing the client for that correction? I mean, I don't review.
Yeah, I mean, they usually, in another situation I had, I mean, luckily I had other contractors with other projects, commercial projects, so they noticed it was built wrong, and they right away said, I don't think, we want to ask you if it's okay. I said, no, this is not the right location. They're like, okay, we'll tear it down and we'll rebuild it. You know, and I was like, sorry. But, and, you know, in that case, it's like, you know, the owner, you have to say, you know, this is how it's built. You know, I came out here to observe it, you know, and it's not built correctly or whatever. You know, it's like, you just tell the owner, it's like, you know, you're going to make the ultimate decision. Like, you know, I'm going to inform your decision making here. It's like, this is the drawings that we were looking at for 2 years. You know, the contractor actually bid it and looked at it, and, you know, it's not like we just give it to them yesterday, or I said build it and figure out if you did it right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew and Donald.
Yeah.
Andy.
I just wanted to kind of, you know, echo what Dan's saying, and encourage you, Rebecca, to, you know, I mean, it sounds like the situation described, it's not in a gray area. I mean, you know, I think there are situations where it is a little bit grayer, but in a situation like that, you know, I would just encourage you to, you know, be brave and speak up. And I had a funny story like that happened early in my practice, and it was with this person who I don't think lives in the country anymore, but Kirsten, it was your friend Birgit. I was spending an afternoon with an architect who was running a job in Cow Hollow in San Francisco. It's super high-end residential project with an elliptical spiral stair, like super detailed, and like you have to figure out how the railing works and all this stuff. And we walked into the house, and the contractor was there with his team, and something wasn't right. I don't think I ever knew exactly what was wrong with it, but this woman who was with me, her name is Birgit, let the contractor have it. And I was like so impressed. I mean, doubly impressed because she was a woman, and, you know, she was talking to a bunch of guys. And I just kind of stepped back, and like for the next 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, she is like, you know, giving them the you know, the deal here. And it's always been an experience that stuck in my head as that is a good example. I mean, you don't want to abuse people, you know, you don't want to be mean to people, but if they're doing something wrong that's clearly indicated in your drawings, there's no excuse for it. And, you know, again, I'm sure there are many gray areas, but if it's on the drawings and it's something that, you know, they should understand, there's no, it's not really debatable.
Yeah. This GC admitted, like after a while, we went back and he looked at his drawings and he admitted that it was wrong. And they said they would tear it out and rebuild it. But I'm still, is it our responsibility to make sure that they don't bill the client for the change that they built wrong?
I think that's when you just need to have a separate conversation with your client and explain what happened. And, you know, I'm not involved in reviewing contractor you know, applications for payment or whatever either. But I think in that situation, you just need to make a note to yourself, like the next time you talk to your client, explain what happened, offer to look at their bill, you know, and their next bill if they want. But I don't think your responsibility extends that far unless you do have a formal, you know, review applications for payment clause in your scope of work.
I'm just going to beg to differ, because I think, again, it's about managing expectations, and there are things like that it's like you don't want that coming back and biting you in the butt, right? I think it's better to, well, at least make sure that the client knows that this happened, and that at least that, you know, give them the heads up that they should make sure that they're not being billed for it.
That's what I said.
Oh, okay. But not that you're going to, okay.
Yeah.
Tell them to say, okay. Donald, do you want to wrap this up?
Quickly, to Rebecca's point, I think you don't feel any anxiety about it. The key is it's not personal, and the contractor needs to know that you're not being personal. And it's important for you to point that out to the contractor so that he respects you professionally. He should think that if there's something not right in the work, you're going to require that to be fixed unless it's totally trivial. And
easier said than done.
And I never think about it coming back to bite me again. I don't believe that. It's all about the project. You're there as a team. And most of the contractors on my jobs are pretty good contractors. They're good people to work with. They will make a mistake sometimes. I make a mistake sometimes. You know, that's part of the trade.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up, and I think the lesson that we all get out of this is, bottom line, it comes down to personalities, and we can do the drawings from here to tomorrow, and we're never going to be able to detail every piece of it. And it's about communications and managing expectations and trying to explain to clients, you know, what to expect and what's what, and using our many years of experience to educate the client. That's it. And I mean, of course, and Linda wants to say something.
Well, no, I think you guys have done an incredible job, and it's really been an honored tradition that Richard Morrison started with very interactive groups. And I think this is how we as small practitioners enhance our own practices, is by finding out what everybody else does and what works well. So wonderful show.
Thank you. And I love hearing from everybody, and I so appreciate everybody showing up, particularly under these odd circumstances, and participating. And I know I have learned a lot from you guys, and I hope that you all feel the same way.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Right, see you next time. Stay well. Stay safe.
Well.